Ready?
Call everyone up on that one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can I go ahead?
Let me just you announce, you say it's a new, you do it, and then the moderator is going to call up each speaker to come up. And then,
Okay, so I have to wait that the person is on stage and then to announce the second one?
she's announcing. So you say, welcome to the afternoon session. Great session.
So I have to tell them to announce it?
No, maybe we just say this. And then maybe you say that Barbara Ubaldi will be introducing the panelists. Okay? When you say that. Okay?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this second session, Creating the Conditions for Europe's GovTech Moment. And Barbara Ubaldi, Digital Government Lead, OECD, will introduce each participant. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I'll start by asking Prime Minister of Serbia, Ms. Ana Brnabić, to join us on the stage, please. Followed by Kyriakos Pierrakis, who's the Minister of State and Digital Governance of Greece. Followed by Ulrich Oernig, who's the CIO of the city of Leipzig, Germany. François Baudin, who's the Vice President of Sales at SAP France since July 2019. And last but not least, Farouk Tuncer, who's the co-founder and CEO of Politea, that is a GovTech startup from Berlin, enabling city leaders to use government data analytics platform to conduct better their work. And I'd like to pick it up on this point, because this panel has the great honor to discuss within this summit to what extent we've been able to take the most of the GovTech context and ecosystem for our governments to be able to deliver better value to our societies through better services, for instance. So I'll ask to start by asking Prime Minister to address the question, to what extent do you think that when we look at the digital transformation of our governments, we are advancing towards the direction we would like it to be?
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here. Well, I think really, in globally, I think it depends really on the country and the priorities of each government. I think for I can speak on behalf of Serbia, and as the Prime Minister, this is my key priority, digital transformation of the society. But again, from country to country it differs. I believe that we live in a very exciting times of the fourth industrial revolution and digital transformation, and that especially for countries like Serbia, who were not the winners of kind of the third industrial revolution, we now have a chance to actually catch up, leapfrog, and use the time that we live in, the fourth industrial revolution, to actually catch up and become one of the winners of the fourth industrial revolution. So I think the countries have unique chance that is almost now we're all starting not from zero, but close to zero, and then we can use this chance. So for Serbia, digital transformation of the society, and I divide this in three key pillars. One is transformation of education. The second one is transformation of public services in order to provide more electronic services. E-government is, for me, the best answer for how to fight corruption, how to introduce transparency and efficiency in services that we provide both to citizens and businesses. And the third key pillar is really digital transformation of business environment, or the support for services, innovation, startup companies, education, science and technology, and all of the things that can actually cause the society and the country to grow faster and have more dynamic, but also more sustainable growth.
Thank you. I mean, we struggled a lot with this question ourselves because we were trying to develop our political platform on digital transformation prior to the election. As you know, in Greece, we have had a new government since July. So one of the primary pillars of our strategy, because of the fact that we're currently 26th out of the 28 countries of the EU in the DESI index, and in the overall sub-indices we're more or less in the same position, was to find out how we could leapfrog this position within 4 years. So we ended up setting a very audacious target, reaching the EU average within 4 years. So one of the things we found by studying other states was that you had a leapfrog, you had a success, A, when the project was effectively the project of the Prime Minister or the President, depending on the system, himself or herself, and B, when you had the centralized structure at the core of the government. So in Europe, governments have been more or less good at vertical policies, education, health, since the 19th century, but more or less more problematic in horizontal policies. And digital transformation is per se a horizontal policy. So that's why you need prime ministerial clout. That's why you need this strong position at the core in order to be able to achieve the projects and the success of the project itself. Now, obviously, it then becomes a function of various other sub-projects. Speeding up the procurement process is a huge issue everywhere, not only in Greece. Having a digital strategy which the whole state is implementing is another project, which is obviously more difficult for federal states rather than unitary governments. And then you have a series of other challenges to face as well. But we felt that the necessary condition was to have a centralized project, Prime Minister's project, and have something which is very concrete at the core. And our feeling is that so far, this is a success in our case, vis-a-vis institutional transformations, interoperability of systems, a unified ID strategy, simplifying life events of citizens and creating those types of simplifications. So our feeling is that we can see a success very quickly if we follow this case study.
Yeah, thank you. Seen from a point of view of a city, of course, we're less able to form unitary policies for the entire nation. And it was very interesting to hear that in your countries there is a central plan. I think our government in Berlin, Angela Merkel, has about 4 ministers and 4 units that parallelly work on digitization. So instead of waiting for them to be coordinated, we figured let's go start ourselves and see what comes down eventually. So, and I think what we see as a success factor in many cases for the concrete digital transformation is is of course the e-government framework law, the financing, all of the sort of stuff that needs to be set centrally, but is also what I'd call the secondary rules. It's procurement, staff, digital privacy, accessibility rules for disabled people. Many of these things are highly laudable, are highly valid and highly important, but they are lateral logics. And if you don't make these lateral logics compliant with digital delivery, they'll stand in the way. And that's something that's not the argument to say we'll abolish privacy, we'll abolish citizen participation, we'll abolish staff representation and so. But if you give, for example, staff representatives a veto right over digitization by law, then there's a risk you might not get very far. And so this is something where I'd call on national governments to not just look at e-government framework laws, but also look at these set of secondary rules that are behind the machinery of government and that will help us to transform services to the digital age.
Donc, dans la mise en perspective des expériences qu'on peut observer côté SAP, juste pour vous rappeler que SAP est aujourd'hui, depuis maintenant quelques années, le leader mondial des applications de gestion et extrêmement déployé auprès des acteurs publics au niveau mondial. Les 20 dernières années ont largement démontré la préoccupation du secteur public à digitaliser ses process. Donc ce n'est pas un phénomène nouveau. On observe qu'effectivement la plupart des États se comparent, s'observent, s'inspirent les uns et les autres. Mais accélérer le processus nécessitera une initiative politique, probablement supranationale, si on veut véritablement aujourd'hui capitaliser et mutualiser sur des systèmes d'information qui aujourd'hui ne sont pas tout à fait comparables, tout à fait au même niveau, même si globalement au niveau européen, on observe quand même beaucoup de pays avec des avancées significatives sur la digitalisation. Donc, dans une dimension européenne, il y a un certain nombre d'initiatives qui sont naissantes sur l'harmonisation d'un certain nombre de référentiels de gestion, de manière à ce qu'un certain nombre d'États ou de collectivités puissent échanger. Et tout récemment, il y a une initiative qui est lancée sur la problématique de l'accès à la donnée, sécurisation et contrôle de l'accès à la donnée. C'est vrai qu'SAP, dans le secteur public comme dans le secteur privé, dispose aujourd'hui d'un capital d'information extrêmement important. Et il y a aujourd'hui le souci des pouvoirs publics de sécuriser l'accès à cette information, qui est souvent une information tout à fait stratégique. Et il y a une initiative qui a été lancée, un projet qui s'appelle Gaia X, donc à l'initiative de l'Allemagne, qui vise dans un premier temps un rapprochement entre la France et l'Allemagne pour créer un réseau de fournisseurs permettant un stockage de la donnée pour essayer de pondérer, bien évidemment, les liens relatifs et la mise sous contrôle d'un certain nombre d'opérations par des opérateurs extra-européens. Donc, il y a vraiment des initiatives lancées, voilà, mais tout ça dépend fondamentalement d'initiatives politiques.
Right. Maybe I'm speaking from the startup perspective on what could create digital transformation successfully. So I would say two things are very important. First thing is the organizational capacity. I would agree with you. You should have the capacity to implement the transformations that tools like our solutions or solutions that have existed but are extended now should bring. And the second thing is about, I would say, managing the tectonics that are actually sitting here, which is, I would say, the public IT that has grown, then big IT. Actually, between us, someone is missing. That's medium-sized companies that have grown in the 90s are now also part of it. And then the startups that are now coming new into the game. And I would, of course, say startups should be more in part of that story, part of that narrative, that digital transformation can work with startups out of the flexibility that we can bring, the agility, but also the cost effectiveness. And I would say government should have a standpoint where to use to develop their own services and keep that also in government, where to use the big IT companies, medium-sized, and also where to use the startups, because that makes a lot of easier for the startups at the end and also easier for the government to know, okay, that's where we push also for certain agenda, because currently where we see unclarity across governments, at least from Germany where we operate in, and we because we're a data analytics platform, we rely on big IT, we rely on public IT providers, and we see that there's no such clarity and clear agenda how to operate which provider and which schema, and I think we can improve on that to create the conditions for success.
Thank you. I like the fact that some of you started touching upon some of the obstacles, right? I mean, we know we are in exciting times that provide us opportunities to leapfrog and deliver better value through digital, but there are some obstacles in this collaboration with the GovTech community that you started mentioning. And one of the big elephants in the room, I work a lot with governments and more with actors outside, seems to be procurement. You mentioned international cooperation and you mentioned cooperation among governments that can maybe try to help overcoming this obstacle. Maybe this time I'm going to ask our private sector representatives to start answering the question, is procurement still a problem? And if so, how can we try to overcome it?
I would say no. I think it's not procurement in a legal sense how we always think it's procurement, you know, it's because there's this law, and because of this law, startups can't participate. I don't believe in that. I haven't seen that so far. I think it's the implication, secondary rules that you mentioned that make it difficult. I give you an example. We operate in Germany. In Germany, we interpret laws very accurately, 120% instead of 100, and it leads. I think the European law is quite flexible in what it's given there, innovation clause, and also the levels of thresholds that we have. It's a lot of, let's say, for startups, enough room to maneuver and play around. The problem is the interpretation in public service. It differs tremendously across government layers and across cities, for example. Sometimes we encounter cities that say, are we actually supposed to talk to you? You know, can you do a demo in our city? And they're afraid it's illegal. Is that illegal, for example? Other cities just do it and have budget to play around with. And what I think what we need is kind of a practical guidance, can be from EU level and dispersed to the ministries of interiors, that, you know, this is how you can procure with a startup. You don't need to ask for 3 balance sheets, and you don't need to ask for revenues. It's just recommended. Not many know that. And then give them something very practical to hand that they can work with, and then interact with startups.
Bon, effectivement, les marchés publics, c'est toujours un problème pour les fournisseurs privés. Donc il y a effectivement une nécessité d'harmonisation des règles pays à pays, c'est évidemment tout à fait fondamental. Notre règle évidemment attendue, je dirais que nous on a la chance d'être dans tous les pays européens, donc on peut toujours adresser la problématique de l'achat d'un point de vue local, mais quand on se positionne d'un point de vue supranational, c'est vrai qu'il faut que les pays, ou en tous les cas que le cadre réglementaire puisse permettre à ce qu'il y ait un affranchissement d'un certain nombre de règles locales qui rendent compliqué l'accès à la commande publique pour un certain nombre d'organisations de plus petite taille. Donc s'affranchir des règles locales, harmoniser au niveau international, et puis être innovant. Bon, je pense que l'innovation, elle demeure dans ce secteur. C'est pas un secteur aujourd'hui qui ne se penche pas sur une amélioration continue de ces procédures. En revanche, il faut que cette innovation soit continue. L'idée, par exemple, d'avoir accès à des marchés en gré à gré. Alors, c'est bon, la notion de gré à gré est souvent compliquée à appréhender dans le domaine public, mais voilà, ce type de marché pour promouvoir l'innovation, en disant telle technologie européenne permettrait des avancées significatives, ne pas hésiter à aller vers des marchés très flexibles en mode gré à gré. Voilà, donc ça me semble être 3 axes importants pour accélérer la digitalisation de l'administration.
Au niveau de la politique des données, j'aimerais soutenir ce que François a dit, que c'est vraiment, on a besoin d'une politique de données. Parce qu'il y a vraiment le GDPR, c'est pas assez. Hein. Il y a trop de questions qui se posent sur sous quel domaine est-ce qu'une certaine donnée est gérée. Et ça, c'est quelque chose de très important pour l'avenir et pour les marchés publics. À l'exemple de la ville de Leipzig, notre nouveau intranet va être fait par une entreprise française. Alors, c'était le résultat d'un appel à offres à niveau européen. Alors, c'est une entreprise française qui va réaliser le intranet pour nous, et c'est une nouvelle expérience pour tout le monde, mais je crois qu'on a les règles et on a besoin, ce que Farouk a aussi dit, on a besoin des champions à l'intérieur des administrations, à l'intérieur des services, qui prennent des risques et qui veulent l'innovation. Et c'est ça que, si on n'a pas ça, on peut changer les règles des marchés publics tels qu'on veut, ça ne va rien donner.
I beg to differ with the view that procurement is a limited problem. I think that for us it's one of the two core risks of not achieving certain goals at certain time frames. The other one being the human resources of the state vis-à-vis the ICT sector and the ability to attract talent. With regards to procurement, we're following EU regulations. You have Directive 24 of 2014. You have the relevant regulations, the Regulation 2365 of 2017. Those are transposed into our national legislation. And I have to say that those regulations are arcane. And they're arcane with regards to the fact that they're reflecting growth priorities of the past. For instance, if you exclude the exceptions of the telecommunications sector and the cybersecurity projects, in all the rest, traditional infrastructure projects are speedier in European regulations with regards to their procurement than ICT projects. And this is fully reflective of past priorities. This needs to shift. A conservative approach would be to match the ICT projects with the speeds of the traditional infrastructure projects in EU regulations. But I think that this is conservative. I think we should move one step ahead. The only projects that are quite speedy are those that are below certain thresholds, 140,000 threshold, for instance, in the EU context. We need to think fast because the speed of technological degradation is much faster than the speed of traditional infrastructure degradation. Agile implementation of projects is obviously an approach, but again, I think it's not enough. I think we fully need to re-examine the thresholds and the speeds at the EU level.
I think this is a complex issue, but I don't think it's really just down to the public procurement regulations, because I think that when I thought how to do this in Serbia and how to, on one hand, resolve some of the issues that we have in, for example, public governance or management of public enterprises, and on the other hand, how to support our startup and innovation companies, the thing is that what startup and innovation companies can offer to you in terms of problem solving is not, usually it's the answer to something that you didn't even know that you have a problem to begin with. So in that respect, I think what innovation companies and startup companies are bringing in terms of competitive advantage is that they are offering the solutions to the problems that you didn't know you had, but you have them. Or you knew you have a problem, but you would never even think about tendering this for the solution because you don't know that the solution exists. That's why they're startup and innovation companies. So in that respect, that's not under the public procurement rules in the first place. That, to me, needs to rely much more on the open data policy. Because based on the open data policy, companies like this one will look at the things that are of interest to them and say, hey, did you know that you could do this much more efficiently? And you say, okay, I had no idea. And then the problem is, how to contract those services. So there, I think that, again, that's part of the digital transformation of the society that needs to, the clear signal needs to come probably from the top of the government or in very decentralized countries from the top of whoever is in charge of that region or province, saying that, listen, it's not against the law to be open for innovative solutions. In those cases, you do not need public procurement. You probably need some kind of a public-private partnership to implement those solutions. So I think, again, procurement is one thing, and that can be sorted, but a big chunk, and probably the most important chunk of this work, does not even get under the public procurement.
Thank you. I like a lot when a question that is meant to be negative is utilized in a positive way, in a constructive way. So thank you very much for your answers. And I really also like the point that you all made, that it's not about the procurement rules that we need to think of when we think about obstacles, but it's really about agile rules, agile project management, and agile people, and trying to work together with them. And I would like to build on something that you said. Because in my work, I really strongly believe in looking into collaborations with actors outside of governments to identify, as you said before, what can help us not only find solutions, but also identify problems in ways that are much more innovative. So if we look at the title of the session, it's about the GovTech momentum. And the question that I have for all of you is, how can we, looking into the future, make sure that we keep maintaining this momentum and we keep nurturing this GovTech ecosystem that is growing in Europe, but that we would like to keep growing to make sure that it helps us deliver better value?
As with anything, I think it depends really on the quick wins for people to start believing that the transformation is possible, for one, and as kind of a second key thing is that it actually brings results and tangible benefits to individual citizens and the society as such. So I'll tell you my experience from Serbia. I became the Prime Minister some 2.5 years ago. And in my manifesto, my expose, before the government was voted in front of the parliament, I said that my two key priorities is, one is digitalization, the other one is education reform. People thought I was crazy. Really, I think that people thought that the country is doomed because Serbia used to think in terms of our traditional strengths of agriculture and mining and blah blah blah, but that doesn't bring growth, and that will kind of make us lag behind for decades and centuries to come. And I saw the potential where everyone would see it just if they looked at our economy and society with an open mind. And really, I mean, the pushback was huge. Now, 2.5 years later, if you ask everyone in Serbia, I bet that perhaps 70% of the people today would say, listen, our biggest advantage, our biggest chance is actually digitalization. Because they saw that, for example, e-government as kind of digitalization of public services brings tangible benefits to them. You know, if you have electronic prescriptions, you don't have to go to your GP every month. You can just go and pick up your medicines that you're taking for whoever knows, 2 years. If the newborn, you have the newborn, before e-government, you had to basically take 3 days off from work to register your newborn. Today, you're doing it free of charge, 10 minutes in the maternity ward. So people were like, okay, this makes sense. In terms of economy, you saw that, from when we introduced the first kind of incentives and really dedicated ourselves to this, our IT sectors is developing at the rate of about 25% year on year. This year we were for the first time registered in the Startup Genome Report as the country, Belgrade Novi Sad ecosystem, and said, actually Serbia is top 5 in the world in talents and blockchain, and amongst top 10 in gaming. And then people said, well, what else are we apart from sports? In the top 5 or top 10 countries in the world. And so you have to, and then people start believing, I think. And now everyone is into it. We have an increasing number of students enrolling in the high school, specialized IT departments, technical faculties. We're investing a lot of money into infrastructure. And now the digital transformation is actually now the transformation started happening. And I'm sure that it will continue in the future because people now believe in it, they see their own benefits and so. For other countries, it's perhaps more difficult. I was just in Berlin talking in a similar, on the Süddeutsche Zeitung conference, similar panel, and they said, but listen, German economy is so strong that it doesn't need to change. We had to change. So for us, the fourth industrial revolution was a big chance, big incentives, and we put all of our eggs in that basket. But for countries that do not need to change, this might be a very, it may be a time where some countries that are kind of laid back because of their strength can lose, while others might win and gain because firstly, they're used to disruption like we are, and secondly, because they have nothing to lose and then they're just pushing ahead. So it will again depend on the leadership and the vision of the country. And to finalize, I am myself a libertarian, so I believe that the government should stay away. But at this particular point in time, since we are living at the time of as the fourth industrial revolution, as this industrial revolution that we saw in the past, but exciting times you're living, we're a generation that gets to live through this. I think now actually the government needs to actually take the leadership and provide clear signals that you want to support innovation, startups, different kind of education, different thinking, that you want to change the society and the economy in that respect to make the full use of the time that we live in. Thank you.
Thank you. I will begin by addressing the last part of your question, how can Europe stay at the forefront? And I think that as a continent, we have a competitive advantage, which is the density and the richness of institutional designs of different states. And even the concept of the sovereign state is pretty much European. It's since the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648. I made a suggestion. I met recently with Commissioner Margrethe Vestager, who is the designated vice president of the committee. And I made a suggestion to her. Studying what we did, we wanted to develop a plan about how to leapfrog and how to change, how to digitally transform the Greek state. And it took us more or less a year to develop the plan, to study what the Estonians did with their IDs, what the government digital service in the UK did with gov.uk and the unified public services, what countries such as Portugal did with simplifications, or Denmark. And this took us a very long time to read and define. And different nations in Europe, in effect, can act as innovation laboratories for GovTech, and they are acting as innovation laboratories. What we do need is to establish the bridges of learning from one another in a proper fashion and in a direct and fast fashion. That we haven't yet established. It's happening quite ad hoc. So my suggestion was that this process, which took us a long time, should have been much more streamlined and coordinated. And one idea, for instance, would be to learn from one another with one particular failure and one particular success in the context of a specific conference. And this would have allowed us to gain up in speed and quickly adopt best practices from other member states. I think that we are in a capacity to do that, and I think that we should do that quickly, because as the Prime Minister said, we are at the forefront of the fourth industrial revolution, but many countries haven't yet concluded their business with the third industrial revolution, meaning digitization. So we need to move in parallel and very quickly on both sides.
To continue on what the Minister has said on learning between different states, I think we have a great platform, and for all my criticism on the German sort of sophistication of GDPR implementation, GDPR is a common European platform. So what I'm trying to do, for example, at the moment, is to bring in video translation into our city services through an Austrian company. And of course, I have a local guild of interpreters who don't want to be put out of business. And their main argument, oh, this is a foreign company, they are from Austria, that's not safe. It's like, no, it's one rule, GDPR, and if they comply with that, then we can, we can use them. There's no way you can block that on any, and so I think yes, we do have certain bases, and there's a common legal space, and we have all these things we've talked about, the procurement rules, the need for ownership within public service to actually want this, the need for a data policy, data rules. But I think we do have, I mean, your question was, what does Europe need to become a powerhouse of GovTech? We need the willingness, we have the initial base, and we can learn from each other because we have common rules, and that's something we need to strengthen.
Donc, en matière d'accélération de la transformation publique, bon, déjà il faut toujours respecter le temps public, qui n'est pas toujours le temps des autres mondes. Cette transformation est en route, donc je pense que c'est tout à fait indéniable. Comme je le disais tout à l'heure, elle relève évidemment toujours d'une initiative et d'une impulsion politique, qu'elle soit européenne ou qu'elle soit locale. Parce qu'évidemment, elle doit souvent s'inscrire elle-même dans un calendrier politique. D'un point de vue technologique, aujourd'hui, effectivement, les acteurs publics nous sollicitent beaucoup, côté SAP, sur un certain nombre de thématiques. J'en relève 3, sur lesquelles il y a d'ailleurs des collaborations qui se mettent en place pour le développement d'applications par des start-up locales ou des équipes même de l'administration. C'est l'intelligence artificielle, ça c'est quelque chose de tout à fait fondamental, sur un point sur lequel on est extrêmement sollicité. La problématique du blockchain, qu'on voit se développer dans les administrations financières, mais également dans le monde de la santé. Parce qu'effectivement, quand on parle de transformation publique, le public c'est extrêmement large, hein. C'est la santé, c'est les collectivités. Bon. Et puis le troisième point, c'est également, on a beaucoup travaillé avec les administrations partout en Europe sur la structuration des systèmes dits de back-office, puis des systèmes dits de front-office. Et la troisième vague aujourd'hui qui se déploie, c'est comment on va capter l'expérience de l'utilisateur, l'expérience de l'agent public sur l'ensemble des systèmes de l'administration qui fonctionnent pour elle-même, mais également pour des tiers extérieurs. Cette expérience, elle est tout à fait fondamentale. On le développe également dans le monde privé. À titre d'exemple, beaucoup de sociétés aujourd'hui ont déployé des portails de e-commerce. Ils ont le sentiment que 80% des gens trouvent ce portail absolument exceptionnel, mais quand on interroge l'utilisateur final, on se rend compte que seulement 30% le trouvent exceptionnel. Donc de la même manière, c'est comment on va améliorer dans un cercle vertueux l'ensemble de ces applications en intégrant de plus en plus l'ensemble des gens qui interagissent avec les systèmes de l'administration. Donc ça, c'est une nouvelle vague qu'on voit se développer auprès des clients SAP.
All right, I think many things have been said before, so I would completely agree that legal basis is set. I would also agree, actually, we need the willingness to have the political ambition to be a world player in GovTech. And I mean, Europe has the best talents in the world and the highest concentration of talents, I would say. And I believe if that market kicks off and the GovTech startups in generally kick off and lifts off, we will have a huge exodus of talents from other sectors into GovTech, because when we hire in Berlin or in other capitals, people want to work for companies that have purpose and that are building products that help deliver better public services. I would say it's a huge, huge potential. The thing that we need to do is foster that by actually, sure, giving grants is also nice from the European level, but actually contracting startups, cooperating with startups and taking them into account in this digital transformation, because that will kick it off and leads the talents to go to startups, but more than that, found new startups, because we need the competition as well.
Thank you so much. I think that the message from the panel is pretty loud and strong, and we all agree that it's important to keep fostering and investing on the powerhouse of GovTech, as it can really help us deliver better public services. And with this, I really would like to thank all of you, because you've been great in providing answers to the many questions in a brief way, but very complete way. Please join me in thanking the panel for this great discussion.